Do 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 do. All right, I don't know if are we live yet. We're live. How's it going, everybody? We are going to try out doing these live shows right now. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, now we're trying to go live. Are we live now? We, I believe, are live now. All right, okay. So here's what we're going to do, and if this is successful, we'll keep doing this, but we're going to go through all of the news that's making headlines in the world of professional wrestling today, but I have omitted any news or information which could potentially spoil future storylines, angles, or match results for you. So, what's going on? All right, we got some people in the chat. That's awesome. If you have any questions in the chat, any news you want to cover, we can do that. But the idea here is to go through all the news in wrestling, but take out any of the information which could potentially spoil future shows for you. So, as an example of this, if you had just been getting your wrestling news from SpoilerFreeWrestling.com or these videos, you wouldn't have known that Ronda Rousey was going to be a surprise entrant in the Royal Rumble on Sunday. Maybe that's something you don't care about. Maybe that's something you care a great deal about. But I know personally for me, I enjoy the shows better when I haven't been given a bunch of spoilers ahead of time. And if you went over, I'm getting a warning about the video resolution. I don't know what that means, so I'll just continue. For me, I don't like to know wrestling news ahead of time. Unfortunately, I find it out anyways. A lot of people say that wrestling's better without spoilers if you don't know what's going to happen ahead of time. And if you'd been following wrestling news websites leading up to the Royal Rumble, you knew for sure that Ronda Rousey was going to be in the Royal Rumble. Not only that, but you probably know what the main events of WrestleMania are going to be because that news is out there too. Well, I don't think that that doesn't improve your experience of watching the wrestling shows. So the idea here is I'll read to you the wrestling news, but I'll take out any of that information such as who's going to show up in the Royal Rumble, what matches are scheduled for WrestleMania, what's going to be the next main event on the AEW pay-per-view. We'll ignore all that stuff so you don't know it ahead of time. So you can enjoy the shows and watch things play out organically. But we should start off with the Royal Rumble. All right, how do I do this here? You'll have to bear with me here. I'm still very much learning all this stuff. Okay, so the Royal Rumble held on Saturday. So the big news, of course, is Ronda Rousey has returned to WWE. It's been almost 3 years because it was the main event of WrestleMania 35 was the last time that she was on the show. So let's just start. We'll go down with everything that took place. So the first match was the Universal Championship match between Seth freaking Rollins and Roman Reigns. It was a good, fun 20-minute match, and then the ending of the match saw Roman Reigns have Seth Rollins locked in the guillotine choke. But when the ref was picking up Seth Rollins' hand to see if he was still conscious, he picked up Seth Rollins' hand, dropped it, and the hand dropped on top of the bottom rope and grabbed onto it. So, of course, Reigns then has to break the hold. The referee counts to 5. Reigns is like, I'm not breaking the hold, and the referee disqualifies him. So, Reigns holds on to the title, but it's that old, the title can't change hands on a countout or a disqualification. So, Reigns is still the champion. I'm assuming that we'll probably just end up doing this match again. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, you invested 20 minutes of your time into this match and it nothing that you saw matters. We're just going to do it again, which is fine. Whatever. I don't think anybody really expected Seth Rollins to defeat Roman Reigns, and then this sort of gives them an excuse to do it again. But even though Reigns retains his title, this was actually the first loss on pay-per-view. Actually, it's the first singles loss that Roman Reigns has had since the TLC pay-per-view in December of 2019. That was the last time Roman Reigns was pinned or submitted, which is pretty nuts when you think about it. Oh, we got someone in the chat saying that they knew in October about Ronda. Yeah, I mean, there'd been the thing is, there'd been so many rumors about Ronda for so long, you never really knew what was true. And so Ronda gave birth in September. That's when her child was due, and did in fact come. It wasn't late. So you kind of start to do a countdown after that. Or you're like, okay, well, when could she come back after giving birth? She came back pretty quick because she gave birth in September. So that's October, November, December, and most of January. So that's 3.5 months after giving birth. I've never given birth before, but I hear it can be a body changing experience. It takes a while to get back in shape after that. So getting back to Roman Reigns. So yeah, Roman Reigns, the last time he actually got pinned or submitted on WWE programming. I don't know if he got pinned or submitted on on a house show or something like that. But the last time he was pinned or submitted on Raw, SmackDown, or pay-per-view, December of 2019. He still hasn't been pinned or submitted as a bad guy. Because what happened was he actually lost to King Corbin, if you can believe that, on the TLC show. And it was one of those things where FTR ran in when they were still with WWE as the Revival. Dolph Ziggler ran in. And so it was a bunch of people cost Reigns this match against King Corbin. And then on the next two pay-per-views, Reigns beat Corbin. So he beat Corbin at the 2020 Royal Rumble, so 2 years ago. And then he beat him again the next month at Super Showdown in Saudi Arabia. So when Rollins defeated Reigns, even though it was by disqualification, that was the first time Reigns has lost in a singles match in over 2 years. That's pretty nuts. He hasn't been pinned or submitted in over 2 years as well. I'm sure there's been tag team matches that he's lost, or lost matches on house shows and tag matches or whatever, but Reigns is WWE's dude. There's nobody that's more protected in WWE than Roman Reigns. And during that time, he'll go to the Survivor Series, and he always wins the champion versus champion match. He defeated Big E. He defeated Big E at the Survivors this year. So, I mean, Roman Reigns is the top guy in WWE. It's 2 years since he's lost a singles match. 2 years since he's been pinned or submitted. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Could be. He's on a collision course with Brock Lesnar. It seems so. Maybe Brock Lesnar is going to be the guy to hand Roman Reigns his first loss of this decade, of the 2020s. Roman Reigns still hasn't lost yet. We got anything going on in the chat here? No. All right. So let's take a look at. After Rollins versus Roman Reigns, we then went to the Women's Royal Rumble match. And again, if you'd been following wrestling news, you'd had it spoiled for you that Ronda was going to be in this event. But that's one of the things where, okay, you're like, well, why would WWE let it out that Ronda Rousey is going to be in the Rumble? Because they can keep a secret when they really, really want to. But in the end, it came out a week before that Ronda Rousey is going to be in this match. So to a certain extent, you must think, okay, well, they figured if they let it out there that Ronda's going to be in the match, maybe we'll sell more tickets. Maybe we'll get more people to sign up for the Peacock streaming service or the WWE network outside of the United States. So maybe that was why they sort of just let it be leaked that Ronda Rousey is going to be in the match. But this is a big deal for WWE, Ronda coming back. Ronda brings a lot of eyeballs onto the product. I mean, she's mainstream famous in a way that nobody else in WWE really is right now. I mean, Roman Reigns isn't really mainstream famous. John Cena kind of is. Well, John Cena definitely is now. But he's not really around. Ronda Rousey is the biggest get people talking superstar that WWE could bring in, and she's back. She's back about 3.5 months after she gave birth. That's pretty cool. So she came in, let's see. She came in, what number did she come in at? Well, anyway, she comes in, she wins the Royal Rumble, and now she's got her choice. Does she either take on Becky Lynch for the Raw Championship or Charlotte Flair for the SmackDown Championship? So I guess we'll just see where that goes. She's going to be on Raw tonight. I think she's going to be on SmackDown like full time, but she's going to be on Raw tonight. Always when they do the road to WrestleMania, the Raw and SmackDown rosters get a little, there's a lot of overlap between them. So Rousey wins the Women's Royal Rumble. We'll just kind of go through quickly the results. Becky Lynch defeated Doudrop to retain her Raw Women's Championship. All right, so let's talk about Bobby Lashley then defeating Brock Lesnar to become the new WWE Champion. And so this was Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar. I think this is a match that a lot of people want to see. But we didn't really get like a conclusive ending. So there's a ref bump. The ref goes down. Roman Reigns comes in, spears Brock Lesnar, and then takes the WWE Championship belt from Paul Heyman, hits Lesnar with the belt, lays him out. He leaves with Heyman. Bobby Lashley pins Brock Lesnar and is once again the WWE Championship. Or was it once again the WWE Champion? But we would see Brock Lesnar later that night. Moving on, Edge and Beth Phoenix defeated The Miz and Maurice as in the couples warfare, I guess. And then we go to the men's Royal Rumble match, and I knew instantly after Brock Lesnar lost to Bobby Lashley that he was coming back in the Royal Rumble and winning the whole thing. It's the only way him losing the way he did to Bobby Lashley makes sense. And of course, he enters in at the number 30 position. He wins the whole thing, and now WWE is advertising that Brock Lesnar will make his WrestleMania decision on Raw tonight. But they made it kind of clear on commentary that, Brock Lesnar's probably going to pick Roman Reigns as his WrestleMania opponent. So those were the results from Raw. Now, a few bit of news bits coming out of this. So, after Ronda Rousey won the Royal Rumble, she did, as you're supposed to do, point to the WrestleMania sign. But what ended up happening was the WrestleMania sign, they had all this pyro go off, and the sign caught fire. It was just like a little bit of fire. Here, I'll see if I can pull up a good shot of it here. This is just WrestlingNews.co. And there's just a little shot of it. There, that's sort of on your screen. So you can kind of see in those little like orange spots in the tweet there. So it's just like a small fire, but they had to bring the whole sign down and extinguish the small fire that was going on. And they actually had to evacuate a whole section while they did this. Then, later in the night, Brock Lesnar points to the WrestleMania sign after having won his Royal Rumble match, and the sign caught fire again because nobody learns from their mistakes. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So everything was fine, but they did have to evacuate a section for a bit because the WrestleMania sign caught fire. All right. Let's see. So what are some other notes coming out of WrestleMania? Okay, so Oksana and Jillian Hall were both backstage during the Royal Rumble. That's been reported by PW Insider and the Wrestling Observer. So they were there in case somebody couldn't go, like if there was a late injury or a late COVID positive test. You had Oksana and Jillian Hall there. Notably not in the Rumble were both Bayley and Asuka, who have been out with injuries. Bayley, of course, has been out since the Money in the Bank pay-per-view last year, since just before that. She got injured in training, so she's been out since the summer. Asuka's been out for a while. No one really knows what's wrong with Asuka, but it's something to do with her arm, because there's been pictures of her with her arm in a sling. There was also no Alexa Bliss in the Royal Rumble, which, I mean, she's cleared to go, but I guess they figure she's doing these vignettes where she's at the therapist's office, so, you know, I guess we'll just let those play out. Some other news. So the former Iconics, who are now known as the Inspiration in Impact Wrestling, they were offered a spot in the Royal Rumble, and they turned it down, just saying, we're not interested in returning to WWE at this time. But it was something that I guess Impact Management was okay with. I mean, Impact Management was okay with Mickie James going into the Rumble. And Mickie James got, you know, she got a good ovation from the crowd. She got her name chanted. She looked good in there because she is really good. She came out with the Knockouts title, which I think is really good for Impact Wrestling. I also have noticed, Impact did one of their strongest television ratings in a really long time last week, and that's on the heels of Mickie James being announced for the Royal Rumble. So that's turned out to be a fairly good promotional tool for Impact Wrestling, is having some of their wrestlers on other people's programming. That's kind of how Impact advertises that they've got a show these days, is by bringing in people from other shows or sending people to those other shows. Because when Kenny Omega was there last year, that did good for Impact's ratings and their pay-per-view buy rates. And now Mickie James in the Royal Rumble is doing good for their television ratings, giving them a nice little boost on TV. Another person that was reportedly contacted to take part in the Royal Rumble, but they couldn't reach a deal with, was Lana. So WWE did reportedly reach out to Lana, but the two sides couldn't come to an agreement. So I don't know if that was just a case of Lana didn't want to go, or if they couldn't come to an agreement on money. But Lana, not a part of the Royal Rumble, although she was asked. And it's one of these interesting things where, like, WWE was in a position where they had to bring in outside talent for the Royal Rumble because they've let go so many wrestlers. They released 86 wrestlers last year and then started reaching out to some of them to come back because they needed them for the Rumble. I don't know, WWE. But they've shaved their roster down, like, significant. And that just gives them a lack of depth, I think. Because they've got less people they can throw out there and see if they can make stars from. They've gotten rid of so many people that they could have tried out in different roles. They could have repackaged. They could have had on hand in case they're dealing with injuries or things like that. So what are you going to do? There was also a TNA chant during the Men's Rumble, which I thought was interesting. It was during a spot where AJ Styles and Robert Roode, so Bobby Roode, were both in. They were doing some spots with each other, and the fans chanted TNA. I remember thinking, like, what a good night for Impact Wrestling. They get a TNA chant during the Men's Rumble. They get Mickie James wearing their title to the ring during the Women's Rumble. That was a good night for Impact Wrestling. So then Ronda Rousey released a statement after, and this, slowly but surely, is going to be loading up on your screen. How do I do this here? Okay, so that should be up on your screen now, as I still try to figure this out. So Ronda Rousey released this statement following her performance in the Royal Rumble. She wrote, "I just had a baby 4 months ago." So yeah, we thought 3.5. She goes 4. "Since the day I found out I was pregnant and calculated my due date, I knew I wanted to return to the WWE at the Royal Rumble 2022. 2 weeks, even 2 months postpartum, that goal seemed crazier than ever before. But I just missed it so much. And so I badly wanted to give Poe," that's the name of her baby, "the same example that my mom gave to me and my sisters. She never broke stride following her dreams while having us. Now it's my turn." Travis Brown wrote a nice message. Some other people wrote some messages. She's got some nice pictures up there on Instagram. All right, so Ronda Rousey back in WWE. I think that's pretty cool. She's a big deal for them, and having her around, I mean, we'll see, because Raw tonight should do a very good television rating. It always does good television ratings, the like show after a big pay-per-view, especially a Royal Rumble, which is one of the biggest pay-per-views. But now with Ronda Rousey on the show and Brock Lesnar on the show and no football. Because remember, like I guess the divisional playoffs didn't have a Monday nighter, but the wild card round did have Monday Night Football. So no football tonight. Lesnar and Rousey on the show. Royal Rumble Fallout. It should be a really strong television rating for WWE's Raw tonight. So I thought that was kind of cool. Another news bit from the Men's Royal Rumble. Kofi Kingston went to go do one of his crazy spots, his Royal Rumble spots, where it looks like he's going to be eliminated, and we all ooh and ah because he's not eliminated. Well, he finally messed one up, and he did get eliminated from the Rumble. So basically, he jumped off the turnbuckle, and he was supposed to land, well, I'm assuming he was supposed to land on the barricade. But he didn't quite make it. Both of his feet touched the floor, and that was not his planned elimination for the Rumble. I guess him and Big E were supposed to do some stuff later, but it never ended up happening because Kofi was eliminated from the Rumble. Also, we got Mustafa Ali put out a tweet before the Royal Rumble. And I'm just loading that up right now for you. And it should be up on your screen. And he said, "No, I would not like to be in the Rumble. I would like my release." And isn't that interesting, what's going on with Mustafa Ali? So if you've been following any of the videos that we've put out recently, Mustafa Ali has requested his release from WWE. He hasn't been on WWE programming since late October. I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, but Mustafa Ali seems like a smart guy, so I don't think I am. I'm assuming that he asked for his release privately before he asked for it publicly. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Now, a couple of years ago, WWE wasn't granting anybody their release. They were holding on to talent as much as they could. They had a very large roster of wrestlers under contract, but now they've done a complete 180 from their old talent hoarding ways, and they've been releasing everyone. 86 wrestlers released last year. Toni Storm requested her release. She was given it, even though she had been on SmackDown in matches with Charlotte Flair just recently. So what is different about Mustafa Ali from Toni Storm? Why is it that they really want to hang on to Mustafa Ali and prevent him from going to an AEW or another promotion? I mean, obviously he's a talented guy, but so is Toni Storm. Toni Storm's really talented too. It could be a case of maybe WWE thinks the relationship between them and Mustafa Ali is salvageable. Like they might be able to get on better terms later. It could be a case that they don't want Mustafa Ali talking bad about them when he leaves. Maybe Mustafa Ali has a story that paints WWE in a particularly unpleasant light. And I think that might be the case. So what the reports are saying is that WWE presented Mustafa Ali with a character change idea. And this particular idea is just something that he would never do. And so he ended up asking for his release. Some reports are saying there was an argument between him and Vince McMahon. This is all coming from anonymous sources, though. So you don't really know who's saying what. Maybe one of those anonymous sources is Mustafa Ali, but it could also just be like a writer who overheard things that he heard other people say. So we don't really know. We won't really know everybody's side of the story until Ali is on Renee Paquette's podcast or some other podcast talking about it. But so it sounds like, if all of those reports are accurate, it sounds like, all right, they presented him with a character that probably played up negative stereotypes, the same types of negative stereotypes that Mustafa Ali has specifically said he wants to fight against. Like he wants to help break down the negative stereotypes of people with Middle Eastern heritage in wrestling. Because when he grew up, they were always the bad guys. They were the Muhammad Hassans and the Sean Devaris, those characters. And he has said in interviews numerous times, like, I want to be a positive role model. And so if WWE did suggest, hey, we want to change your character to be more like Muhammad Hassan, I think Mustafa Ali would have a pretty big problem with that. And that could have led to the two sides really having issues with one another. I mean, but again, I don't know that that's the case. Just seems like that's like a very likely possibility. All right, another bit of news here. Toni Storm announced for Wrestlecon 2022. And so this is actually Toni Storm's first post-WWE booking. And again, she asked for her release in late December and was granted it. No problem. They were like, yeah, okay. Go do whatever you want, Toni Storm. And like, Toni Storm's a really good wrestler. I had actually really liked what Toni Storm looked like she was becoming somebody they were pushing on SmackDown. And I was happy about that. You know, because they need more women on both shows that they push. Like it seems like the women's revolution has taken a step backwards as of late. Like it seems like the women's division rosters on Raw and SmackDown are smaller than they have been in many years. So when they started pushing Toni Storm, I was like, great. Pushing Toni Storm, pushing Shotzi Blackheart. I'm like, all right, cool. Pushing Aaliyah. So it's like, all right, we're going to have some more women in the mix. And I thought Toni Storm would be one of the best ones. But I guess, and the reports are saying that she was just kind of beaten down by the travel, or it just wasn't working out for her. And so she requested her release, and they're like, fine. But what's different between Toni Storm asking her for her release and Mustafa Ali? Why were they like, yeah, sure, Toni Storm, go do whatever you want? But they weren't like that for Mustafa Ali. And you could say, oh, well, Mustafa Ali requested his release publicly. I was like, well, I'm assuming he requested it privately beforehand. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, Toni Storm is booked for this Wrestlecon event, which will take place WrestleMania weekend in Dallas. You kind of wonder where Toni Storm could show up next. Obviously, we won't give out any spoilers here. I don't know of any spoilers for Toni Storm, though. But I think she would make any roster that she goes to better. We'll see what's next for her. I'm surprised it didn't work out with her in WWE. Because I felt like she had a larger-than-life presence that's so important for WWE programming. I thought she would be really successful. But there's all kinds of women that I think will be successful in WWE, and it doesn't work out. I thought Taya Valkyrie, like as Frankie Monet, was going to be very big. Because one, Taya Valkyrie has been super successful wherever she's gone. She went to Mexico. She was super successful there. Then she went to Lucha Underground. She was really cool on that show. Then she goes to Impact Wrestling, and she sets all these records as Knockouts champion. So she's been successful everywhere. Then she goes to NXT. She comes out as Frankie Monet. She looks like $1 million. She looks like a cool character. Everything's all set for her to be a big star. And then the NXT 2.0 rebrand comes into effect. They look at her age on paper and are like, "Oh, that's not for us." And then they release her. That's stupid. I hope Taya Valkyrie ends up somewhere cool. I hope Toni Storm ends up somewhere cool soon too. You know, I'd like to see them both in AEW. I hope AEW would sign them. Well, I guess we'll just see what happens. What's going on? We got anything going on in the chat? No. Feel free to chat, guys. Send questions. What else is going on? Okay, so Ruby Soho then reacted to something that happened in the Royal Rumble. If you were like me and you were a big Riot Squad fan, the Royal Rumble was pretty cool because Sarah Logan returned. I think, like, all I'm hearing right now is Sarah Logan's return was like a one-off thing. But that doesn't mean that she couldn't still get hired back, right? Like, she's married to one of the Viking Raiders, Rowe, the not handsome. I can't remember what their name. I have no idea which one's Eric and which one's Ivar. I still know Hansen and Rowe. Hansen's got hair. Rowe does not have hair. I feel like she could come back and be a member of the Viking Raiders pretty easily, or just like a member of the women's roster. Like, it feels like she could do this sort of Viking gimmick and be like they need more unique characters in their women's division. Like, Shotzi's kind of a unique character. I mean, she looks different, she acts different. I wish she still came out with the tank, but I guess she's a heel now. Sarah Logan looks different, you know. She's got the Viking hair and, you know, wears all the animal skins and stuff like that. So hopefully she'll be brought back. I don't know. Certainly there's been nothing out there about that. But Ruby Soho tweeted this out. She's just got 6 and 25. And those were the numbers that Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan came out with. Those were the numbers that Sarah Logan and Liv Morgan were in the Royal Rumble. And, of course, they were the Riot Squad for the longest time. So Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan had a bit of a reunion after both were eliminated. And Ruby Soho just reacting to that. God, like, Ruby Soho is another one where I can't believe they would release her. Like, she has so much to offer. And she actually played a major role in the build-up to WrestleMania 35. Because, like, the 3 women that were in the main event, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, they all feuded with the Riot Squad. Like, the Riot Squad were the ones that would, like, put them over in the weeks and months leading up to WrestleMania. So I thought back then, I was like, oh, they must really see value in their ability to wrestle because they're in these important matches leading up to WrestleMania. But Soho was cut. When was Soho cut? Like, she was cut in the first pandemic cuts, I think. Like, they parted ways with her pretty quickly. Sarah Logan also released. They're pushing Liv Morgan. Like, they're giving Liv Morgan a chance to shine. You know, she had that rivalry with Becky Lynch. I mean, but she's still sort of in that tier that Toni Storm was in, that Shotzi Blackheart is in. It's like, you're on the roster, you get some TV time, we'll even give you some wins, but you're not Charlotte, you're not Becky. You know, you're in this second tier. And it would be cool to see if Liv Morgan could take it up a tier. I don't know. Maybe Liv Morgan could win a title at some point. but we'll see what they decide to do with her. All right, also there's been some articles out. Here are the producers that produce the different matches. And this is an article on SEScoops.com. I think it comes from Fightful Select. And I'll just switch your thing here so you can read it. Okay, so Michael Hayes and P.D. Williams produced the Universal Championship match between Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. That seems like a clash of styles. Michael Hayes, old school, fabulous Freebird. P.D. Williams, the originator of the Canadian Destroyer. They worked together on the Seth Rollins-Roman Reigns match. And one of them came up with the idea with, well, why don't we have Roman Reigns just hold on to a submission after the bell and he'll be disqualified. Finlay, Shane Helms, Molly Holly, Pat Buck, and Michael Hayes produced the Women's Royal Rumble match. And Pat Buck and Sean Daivari produced the Raw Women's Championship match between Becky Lynch and Doudrop. Michael Hayes and Jason Jordan produced the WWE Championship match between Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley. That makes sense. If you're going to have a match between two amateur wrestlers, have Jason Jordan in there helping out. Adam Pearce and Kenny Dykstra. If you remember Kenny Dykstra from the Spirit Squad. He did other stuff too, but he was Kenny in the Spirit Squad. They produced the Edge and Beth Phoenix versus the Miz and Maurice match. And I love this. Not even Joseph Park, just Abyss. Jamie Noble, Sean Daivari, and Adam Pearce produced the Men's Royal Rumble match. Boy, if you read this over, Adam Pearce sure has ascended to an important role backstage in WWE. A couple of notes here. No Tyson Kidd. Tyson Kidd wasn't on the show. He works backstage, but he wasn't there for the Rumble this year. And, of course, neither was Triple H, who is still away and dealing with health problems. Unfortunately, kind of the update on Triple H from the latest Wrestling Observer is he's not really expected to be back. I don't know if that's just ever or in the near future, but in terms of coming back and is he going to play a role in the new NXT, nothing like that has been discussed. So hopefully Triple H is doing well. Triple H, low-key, has contributed a lot of positive things to wrestling. You hear Triple H's name and everyone's like, oh, the politicking and the burying people. But Triple H has, and this came out in his booking of NXT, he also has a very healthy respect for professional wrestling. Triple H isn't a bad guy. I don't think. I think he's been good for wrestling. He's the one behind kind of getting in a lot of wrestlers from the past and having them put in the WWE Hall of Fame. It said that he was what brought Bruno Sammartino back so that he could be inducted in the Hall of Fame. And that's a big deal for anyone whose fandom dates before the 1980s, before the WrestleMania boom. For fans of that era, there's no way you could have a Hall of Fame without Bruno Sammartino being in it. So Triple H has contributed a lot to professional wrestling, so I really hope he's doing okay. All right, the next news update here. Lio Rush was injured. We don't know how bad. So this was at Pro Wrestling Guerrilla's big event every year, the Battle of Los Angeles. If you're not familiar, it's basically like a tournament that they do over a weekend, and it's just really good wrestling. So Lio Rush was at that. He was wrestling Buddy Matthews, who was Buddy Murphy in WWE. Rush won the match. He actually won it by disqualification, which is weird because I didn't think PWG did a lot of disqualifications. But Matthews attacked him after the match, gave him a curb stomp. Rush never returned and had to go to the ER. Now, he wrote on Twitter just being honest with you guys here, I'm not good, but I will be good. And when I'm back, I'll be dangerous, man of the hour. So that sucks for Lio Rush because he's had to deal with a lot of injuries. Like he's had those shoulder problems. If you remember, after his last shoulder injury, he retired. I mean, he went back on that pretty quickly. And it's just a bad time for Rush to get injured too, because he's about to be a free agent. If you remember, he wrote on Twitter or social media that, well, I guess Twitter is social media. He wrote like last week or something like that. My contract with AEW is going to run out on February 14th, and after that, I'm a free agent. So he had only had a short-term deal with AEW, and he'd been involved in that angle with Dante Martin. Everything seemed like it was going good. He was involved in a storyline. I don't know if his contract not getting renewed has anything to do with what he said regarding what happened between Big Swole and Tony Khan. Just to recap, Big Swole didn't have her contract renewed by AEW either. A little while later, she was on her podcast and it had some comments about the lack of diversity, the lack of representation for black athletes in AEW. Then sort of some articles come up which say like, oh, Big Swole claims lack of diversity in AEW, something like that. Tony Khan then responds to one of those articles, and he just lists off different athletes that they have but then he takes a shot at Big Swole. He says, I let Big Swole's contract run out because I wasn't impressed with her wrestling or something like that. Like, definitely took like a little nasty shot at Big Swole, probably because he was feeling defensive because she had said that there's a diversity problem in AEW. So Lio Rush then sends out a tweet saying like, I want Tony Khan to apologize. I'm not okay with this. Then like a day later, he releases a statement saying he's talked to Tony Khan, and talked about issues concerning diversity and things like that. So it seemed like everything was then all good between Tony Khan and Lio Rush. Definitely doesn't appear as though it's good between Big Swole and Tony Khan. So it seemed like things were fine between Tony Khan and Lio Rush, but did Tony Khan decide to let Lio Rush's contract come up after that? Like, maybe Tony Khan decided, like, look, if you're going to speak out against the company, I'm not going to renew your contract. I have no idea if that's the case or not. Could just be, you know what, I didn't like how this thing with Dante Martin was playing out. We're just going to end it. It was only a short-term contract. You can go do New Japan, all this other stuff, and maybe we'll bring you back later. That's probably the more likely scenario. Because I know Tony Khan's a big fan of Lio Rush. He said so in many interviews. Lio Rush is like an incredible athlete and entertainer. I would hate it if he's not back in AEW at some point. But maybe they've just decided, like, okay, we'll let your contract run out. You can go do New Japan, all your other booking, stuff like that. But then you think, like, another contract that is expected to run out is Brian Cage's. And Brian Cage's wife had spoken out about how Brian Cage was being used in AEW. And so this is Melissa Santos. She just put out a thing saying that, he's being misused right now. And it's not anything that other people haven't expressed too, because Brian Cage is kind of a guy where, like, if you're going to use him, he's got to be near the top of the card just because of how he looks. And, like, he's a monster, right? And you don't ever have your monsters just floating around the mid-card. They're either at the top or they're not on the show. And it's sort of how they use Lance Archer too, right? Lance Archer is either not in the show or feuding with one of the top baby faces. So she said, okay, they're misusing Brian Cage, yada, yada, yada. She does an interview later saying, like, yeah, I feel bad about having said those comments because Brian Cage got some heat backstage from it. And so it appears, and I'm just saying it appears, I'm not saying that they're doing this, But two people who sort of spoke out against the company, not really, but kinda, now don't have their contracts renewed by AEW. I don't know. Like, I mean, to some extent, you could say even if they are doing that, like letting contracts run out of people who have spoken out against the company, you could easily make the argument that there's nothing wrong with doing that. Like, if you're going to speak out against the company, maybe you don't need to be here. But I don't know. It could also just be the case where with Lio Rush, it's like, all right, this one angle didn't work out. We'll bring you back later. And I do think we'll see Lio Rush back in AEW at some point. He's just too talented not to end up back there. And in the case of Brian Cage, I think maybe like they're just of this attitude where with somebody like Brian Cage, you either use him at the top of the card or not at all. And right now, our main event picture, there's no room there. So maybe the best thing for them is to let Brian Cage's contract run out and Brian Cage can go do other things. I would love to see Brian Cage in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I think Brian Cage could easily go to New Japan and wrestle sort of a different style because Brian Cage wrestles a very West Coast indie style, like with lots of lucha, because he's been to Mexico a bunch. He was on Lucha Underground. He wrestles sort of in California where there's a heavy lucha emphasis. So he's doing, a lot of lucha moves, even though he's super, super big. But I think if he goes to New Japan, he's going to learn a more strong style approach, more hard-hitting, more suited to his body type. So I think we could see an even cooler Brian Cage if he leaves AEW and then goes to New Japan Pro Wrestling for a little bit. All right, what else we got going on here? So hopefully Lio Rush is all good soon. Also, news that just came out, and this is kind of surprising given everything, But Ric Flair put out this tweet that is just loading on your screen now, where him and his wife Wendy are splitting. This is crazy. So after taking some time apart, what is wrong with how Ric Flair tweets? Why does he capitalize the first letter of every word? It's not like, it's better than all caps, but it's still not very good. All right, so after taking some time apart, Wendy and I have decided to go our separate ways. Please respect our privacy and our families during this time with an exclamation mark. Please respect our privacy and families during this time! I will love and cherish all of our memories together forever, and I will forever be thankful for all she has done to make my life better. That, kind of sucks. Because he was always so complimentary of her, right? He was always big on how well she treated him while he was going through health problems and things like that. So I'm surprised. That's Fifi, the French maid. They've been together a long time, too. Man, that sucks. That sucks for Ric Flair and Wendy. All right. Also, we got Matt Cardona was on Busted Open Radio, and some of his comments made their way to SEScoops.com. And he talked about all of the One Night Stand 2006 references that were in his match with Joey Janela on the World on GCW pay-per-view. When was that? Not last weekend, but the weekend before. So not this weekend that just happened, but the other weekend. All right, so if you watch that match was ridiculous. There was so much stuff that happened. It was all just angles and some wrestling moves thrown in. But they recreated a lot of the ECW One Night Stand 2006 stuff that happened in the Rob Van Dam John Cena match because they were in the Hammerstein Ballroom. So they're in the same building. So Cardona comes out with a shirt that's got a sign that says, "If Cardona wins, we riot" on it. A fan has that same sign up in the rafters. According to Cardona on Busted Open Radio, that sign and that fan wasn't a plant. Somebody really brought that. Also, during the match, they recreated the John Cena throwing his shirt into the audience spot from One Night Stand 2006. If you remember that show, John Cena did the thing where he throws his shirt into the crowd, but because it's the ECW fans and they hate him, they threw the shirt back in. But John Cena, because he's a goddamn pro, and like he just no-sells it, takes his shirt, throws it back to the crowd again. Crowd throws it back again. This plays out a bunch of times. John Cena gave the performance of his life at One Night Stand 2006. He was so good at playing the heel that night that it makes me really wish he had turned heel at some point in his career. So they recreated that. They also recreated the end of the John Cena Rob Van Dam match. In the match in 2006, Edge came in wearing a motorcycle helmet and speared John Cena through a table, and that led to Rob Van Dam picking up the win. At the World on GCW pay-per-view show earlier this month, Brian Myers came in a motorcycle helmet. He spears Joey Janela through a door. That leads to the finish of the match. So more One Night Stand references. And so here are some of the quotes that Cardona said on Busted Open Radio. So Cardona said, "There were times in that match where I just had to turn away from the camera because I felt like I was smiling because I was having so much fun in there. I said it last time, Mikey Whipwreck brought me to ECW One Night Stand 2005, and I've always wanted to wrestle in that building. I never thought I would have the opportunity. To be there, it was everything I hoped it would be and more." And so Cardona also talked about the fan having the "If Cardona wins, we riot" sign. He said, "I had made a t-shirt, 'If Cardona wins, we riot,' and then someone had the sign. People thought I planted that sign. Like, no, fans really brought that." He also talked about being a diehard ECW fan. He said, "Because I am such a diehard ECW fan, so that building meant so much to me. I never got to go there for the real ECW shows, but like I said, I saw One Night Stand. I feel like that was the final ECW show. That night was just incredible, but for me, this show at the Hammerstein was even more incredible. Because I got the little tease in 2005, just being a fan, hoping one day I'd get to wrestle there. And then I finally did it, and it was everything I thought it would be." So cool stuff for Matt Cardona. I love that tweet that he put out after. It's him and Brian Myers in the Hammerstein, and he writes, "Man, I really wish we didn't get fired. We could have been chasing around that 24/7 title right now." Matt Cardona. I'm loving him in GCW. Lots of fun stuff. All right, just a couple more news notes, and then we are out of here. Ring of Honor announced last week that they are having their first ever Hall of Fame. They announced today that the Briscoes will be the first inductees into the Ring of Honor Hall of Fame. That's pretty cool. Obviously, they've been there since the beginning or close to the beginning. So that's pretty cool for the Briscoes and for Ring of Honor. That should be an interesting show when Ring of Honor comes back. Because there could be some big names on that show. Like anybody who walks through a forbidden door could be on that show. Anyone not in WWE could be on that show. People from New Japan, people from AEW, people from Impact, they could all be on that Ring of Honor show when Ring of Honor comes back for Super Card of Honor. I think that's on April 1st. So that should be pretty interesting. And then the lineup for Dark Elevation, which will air on YouTube tonight. So this show is from the Wolfstein Center in Cleveland. And it was taped before Dynamite on Wednesday. The scheduled matches include Lance Archer versus Chase Oliver, Brandy Rhodes versus Kylan King. That could be interesting. Rhodes versus King. Jay Lethal versus Casey Carrington. Nikki Victory versus Anna Jay. Dante Martin will team up with Lee Moriarty and Matt Sydal. They will take on Aaron Solo, Nick Camarado, and QT Marshall of the Factory. Ruby Soho will team up with Thunder Rosa. They'll take on Jocelyn Navarro and Megan Myers. And Serpentico will take on Penta El Zero Miedo. That should be a fun match. That Serpentico versus Pentagon match. And then tonight we've also got WWE Raw. And I can't remember where this show is coming from. Somewhere in Oklahoma? Maybe? I can't remember. But the Raw tonight, a few things have been announced. Let's just go to the WWE.com preview for tonight. So they've announced 3 things. None of them are matches. Bobby Lashley is going to usher in the Mighty Era once again. So that basically just means he's going to have a talking segment where he talks. Brock Lesnar is going to choose his WrestleMania opponent. And it'll be interesting to see if we should find out more about what his relationship with Paul Heyman is like now, after what happened at the Royal Rumble as well. And Ronda Rousey returns to Raw Monday night. So, as we said before, you've got Ronda Rousey, you've got Brock Lesnar, you've got interest in the Royal Rumble fallout. It will be a very high rating this week for Monday Night Raw, so they will probably make that a big show. And with that, we're out of news to discuss. We've gone through all of the wrestling news, but I've omitted any news or information which could potentially spoil future storylines, plot lines, angles, or other stuff for you. A lot of people find this a better way to follow wrestling news. If you appreciate this type of wrestling coverage, please be sure to hit the subscribe button, click the like button, and share this video with anyone who you feel would enjoy it. Thanks again, everyone. I'm Gentleman Ian for Spoiler